My name is Melissa Lynch and I'm 34 years old. 7 years ago, on my father's 65th birthday, my son Milo, who was 5 years old and autistic, spent 3 weeks working on a painting for his grandfather. He didn't talk much back then. Words came out slow and careful, like he had to build them one piece at a time before he could say them out loud. But he could paint. He painted with his whole body, swaying back and forth, humming under his breath, mixing colors until his little hands were stained blue and gold and orange. He told me in his own halting way that the painting was the ocean at sunset because his grandfather used to talk about the beach house he grew up near. Milo wanted to give him something that felt like home. He wrapped it himself badly with too much tape, and he was so proud of it that he carried it into the party with both arms, like it was made of glass. My father unwrapped it in front of 30 guests. He held it up, turned it sideways, and laughed. Not a warm laugh. A laugh meant for an audience. He said loud enough for the whole backyard to hear, that it looked like something a toddler smeared on the sidewalk, and that it was cheap, and that he'd expected something real from his only daughter for his milestone birthday. Not a 5-year-old's finger painting. Someone chuckled along with him because that's what people do when a powerful man makes a joke at someone else's expense. I watched Milo's face. He didn't cry. He just went very still, the way he does when the world gets too loud and too sharp all at once. And he wrapped his arms around himself and stared at the grass. I didn't argue with my father that day. I didn't scream or make a scene, even though every part of me wanted to flip the dessert table over. I walked across that backyard, picked up the painting my father had set down like garbage, took my son's hand, and I left. I swallowed every word I wanted to say because I knew if I opened my mouth, I would say something I couldn't take back, and because Milo needed me calm more than he needed me right. We drove home in silence, except for Milo quietly repeating cheap, cheap, cheap under his breath, testing the word the way he tested all new words, not understanding yet why it had been aimed at him like a weapon. I hung that painting in our hallway that same night, not in a closet, not in a box in the garage, right where I would see it every single morning on my way to make coffee. I told myself it would be a reminder of exactly what kind of man my father was, so I would never again make the mistake of expecting warmth from him. I didn't know that night that I was looking at $3 million hanging crooked on a nail I'd hammered in myself. Over the years, Milo grew. Therapy helped him find his voice slowly, piece by piece, the same way he built his colors. Painting became the one place where he never stumbled, where nothing needed translating. Teachers started noticing. A woman from a community arts program saw photos of his later work and asked if she could include one piece in a small local show. I said yes without thinking much of it. I never once considered showing that first painting, the birthday one, because to me it was an art, it was evidence. It was the moment I learned exactly how little my father thought of my son. My father, in the meantime, barely reached out. A birthday card here, a stiff phone call at Christmas, always with some comment tucked inside about how Milo was doing considering everything, which was his polite way of reminding me he still saw my son as less than. I stopped expecting anything else from him. I built a life around Milo instead, and it was a good life, a full one, even without my father in it, the way I once wanted him to be. Then, 7 years to the month after that birthday party, I got a call from a gallery in the city, a real one with a real name I recognized from articles. They told me a private collector had paid $3 million at a curated charity auction for a mixed media piece titled Sunset for My Grandfather, painted by a 5-year-old autistic boy in 2019. They wanted to confirm the artist's identity because the piece had been submitted years earlier, through the community program tagged only with Milo's first name and initial, and somehow impossibly it had ended up in the auction catalog without me ever signing off on the final sale. I hadn't even hung up the phone when my father called. He didn't ask how Milo was. He didn't ask how I was. He said in a voice shaking with something that wasn't shame that the money was his, because it was his birthday gift, because his name was on the original card, because he was the one who'd kept the painting all these years in a storage unit after supposedly saving it from being thrown away by movers. He said it like a man rehearsing a lie he'd already decided to believe. I stood in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, and I felt something in me go cold and very, very clear. I told my father to say that again, slower, because I wanted to make sure I understood him correctly. He repeated it. He said the painting had technically been his property since the moment Milo handed it to him at his own birthday party, that a gift legally belongs to the person it was given to, and that whatever happened to it after that, including ending up worth $3 million, was his business and his alone. I asked him one simple question. I asked him where exactly he had stored this painting for 7 years, the one he had called cheap in front of 30 people and sat down on a folding table like it was trash. He went quiet for a moment too long before he said storage, like the word itself would end the conversation. Here is what my father didn't know. The painting hanging in my hallway for 7 years, the one I dusted every week, the one Milo used to stand in front of some mornings just to look at his own colors, was the original. The one he claimed to have lovingly preserved in some storage unit did not exist. He had never kept anything. He had walked away from that party and forgotten the painting existed within the same week. The same way he forgot most things that didn't serve him. What the gallery had received years ago through the community arts program was a piece Milo painted afterward, inspired by the first, a second sunset he made because he loved the colors so much he wanted to paint them again. 2 paintings, 2 different objects. My father was about to build his entire claim on a story that fell apart the second anyone asked to see paperwork he didn't have. I called the gallery back before my father could hang up and start planning his next move. I explained everything calmly. The timeline, the original piece still hanging in my home. The second piece Milo made months later, purely for himself. The fact that I had never signed a release for either to be sold, and that whoever handled the intake at the community program years ago had made an error that needed to be corrected immediately, and publicly before any funds changed hands. The gallery director, a sharp, careful woman named Odilise Ferrer, told me the sale hadn't fully closed yet, that funds were held in escrow pending final artist verification because of Milo's age at the time of creation, and that this was exactly the kind of gap they needed filled before releasing a single dollar to anyone. 3 weeks later, I stood inside that gallery for the first time. With Milo beside me in a blazer, he picked out himself, calm and proud in a way that made my chest ache. The exhibition that evening wasn't just about the sale anymore. Word had gotten out, quietly at first, then not quietly at all, that a 12-year-old autistic artist was the true creator of the piece everyone had been discussing for weeks. Reporters showed up. Other artists showed up. My father showed up, too, uninvited, standing near the back in a suit that used to intimidate me, trying to catch my eye, like we could still pretend this was a family celebration. The buyer stepped forward that night. He was an older man named Desmond Okafar, a collector who had specifically outbid to other parties because, as he told the room, the painting had a rawness he hadn't felt from anyone in 20 years of collecting. An honesty he said most professional artists spend their whole careers trying to fake. When Odilise explained in front of everyone that the true painter was a child in the room, and that the child had been called cheap by a family member the night he made his very first version of this same sunset, the entire exhibition went completely silent. Not awkward silent. The kind of silence that happens when a room full of people suddenly understands they are standing next to something bigger than money. My father tried to speak up once, tried to say something about how proud he'd always been, and Desmond simply looked at him and asked quite plainly if he was the man from the story. Nobody answered for him. Nobody needed to. My father left before the applause even started, and he has not called me since, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel a single ounce of guilt watching him go. Milo stood in the middle of that gallery with his painting on the wall behind him. $3 million, now legally and rightfully his, held in trust for his future. And he looked at me with the kind of quiet, steady pride that no amount of cruelty 7 years ago had managed to take from him. I kept that first painting. I kept it when it meant nothing to anyone but us. And I would keep it 1,000 times over. Because some things are only ever cheap to the people who never bothered to really look. If this story moved you even a little, hit subscribe because there are so many more stories like this one waiting to be told.